Hey everybody, welcome. Today we are going to learn some fun interactive tricks for the Unity game engine. So part of real-time modeling is that actual real-time factor, which means we don't need to render the animation. It will interact live with our players and our viewers. We're seeing a lot more of this in shows like The Mandalorian, Jungle Book. A lot of the Jon Favreau projects out there in the industry are using real-time game engines with 3D models. So we're going to go ahead and open up the Unity Hub here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit New to create a new project. And we're going to call this Interactive FPS here, first person system here. We're going to make it 3D. We're going to go ahead and hit Create. And as we do that, Unity is going to boot up and load all of our templates. And what we're going to actually use is free assets from the Unity store to kind of build out our functionality. So you need very little knowledge of coding for this. And, it's really just drag and drop. So let's explore kind of this kind of style that we're going to build. So we're going to give it a few seconds here to load up. And at this point, you should kind of understand how to open a Unity file, how to drag and drop your image into it, or your obviously your character, things like that. And here we go. So first thing we're going to need is to create a 3D game object, just so we have some sort of ground plane that we're putting our characters on. And on top of that, we'll do another 3D object, and we'll just put a sphere, just because it's kind of cool to see that shadow. And eventually we're going to interact with stuff like this. So I'm going to hit W. I'm just using my hotkeys from Maya. Again, really nice. I'm in the Scene tab right now. You'll notice if you hit the Game tab, you can't really move. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But now we're kind of ready to go. And if we wanted to change that light, we could go to Rotate and make the time of day different. We could add a skybox. We could do a lot of different things, but that's another demo for another time. So what we're going to do right now is, having this object in the scene, we want to create a first-person controller. You may have seen these in kind of like shoot-'em-up games and things like that. So in older versions of Unity, you could actually right-click and import a new package that would already have all of the stuff in it. They've previously gone a different direction. So to get a first-person controller now, we're going to go to the Assets Store. And it's going to take a few seconds to load up. Make sure you have an internet connection. If you don't, this Asset Store won't load. I went ahead and logged in to my account, and I'm going to look up the FP All-in-One. Now, this is not made. It's made by a person named Aiden Graves. It's a free plugin. It got pretty good reviews. Let's go ahead and click on it. So what this is going to do is manage a lot of the coding for us. Again, it's going to give us dynamic footsteps, head bobbing, all sorts of things. So I'm going to go ahead and hit download and give that a few seconds. And it says I purchased it. It was free. Don't worry. Sometimes that worries people. It's going to download it up into the scene. And then I'm going to hit import. And when I import it into the scene, there we go, it will pop up this window. And this is all that it comes with. So I'm going to just kind of leave it the way it is. And I'm going to just hit import here. And that's going to load it into that folder I had on my desktop. So we're going to give this a few seconds, because it's basically like a zip file, and it's unpacking all those files to your desktop. Keep that in mind, that it's going to go into the folder that you have your scene in. So when I set up my project, I like to make sure it's like very clearly on a desktop. And then when you're ready to go, you can see it creates its own little folder. So I'm going to go back to the scene mode, and let's explore this first person pack. All right, so as you can see, there's all sorts of helpful documentation. There's a README. If I double click on this, it's basically telling you what is in the file. There's a documentation that will open up in Word that will kind of go through the different functions if you're into coding. So you have that option. And then on top of that, we have a little demo scene. But if we continue to click through the packages, if we go to the first person AIO, we'll find there's actually a prefab. Now, what a prefab is it means like everything has been compiled and linked together into this one scene. So if I take this prefab and drag it into our scene, what it's going to do is actually give us a camera. And so that camera is going to be really fun, because when we hit play, immediately, I'm just moving my mouse, we get a whole new world of interactivity. So I'm going to hit escape real quick and not play this. So what does this mean? All right, so what this created was a character linked controlled camera. And so when I go to inspector, I can see I have a lot of options for like how it hits things, how the mouse movement, like if it is it sensitive, what my character's steps would be, how it jumps. I even have like things like crouch modifiers and what key that I would use to crouch as a character. This is a great little kind of like a plugin, but in this case we call it a prefab. So if I go to game mode now, we're going to actually see through the viewer. So when I hit play here and my character jumps in, I'm now live in my video game. And I'm going to use, I don't have a controller, but I'm going to use my WASD keys. If I hit W, I'll move forward. I can move toward this ball. You can actually see I run into the ball. If I hit space bar, I'll jump. How cool is that? If I hit A, I can move to the left. D, I can move to the right. And S, I can move back. And this is a really amazing option here. So I can also use my arrow keys if those don't work for you. And the more we play with these settings to the right, the better we can get kind of acclimated to this movement. So this is a really great thing. I love this plugin. To get out of play mode, you just hit escape once, go up to your play button and hit it again. And now you're back. If you go to your scene tab, you're back in your playable mode. So that's a really easy way to create a pretty nice controller. So not too bad, right? So if we grab all these, we can like scale up our controller. We can play with some of those settings obviously up here as well as we continue to kind of build out our scene. So how do we get this outside of Unity? So once you have a nice playable controller, again, we'll hit play again just to kind of see how cool is that, right? If you want to export this from Unity, you actually have to publish or build your project. So I'm going to go to File, Build Settings, and you're going to see I have a few options. Now this really depends on what platform you're starting on. So if you have like a Mac platform, like obviously it's going to bring up some things for like Mac. Right now it says Windows. So if our target, I'm on a Windows machine right now, so I can add my open scene. I can build it to Windows, which is really cool. I could build it to Xbox, PlayStation, all different types of Windows, not just the Windows I'm in currently. For the web and HTML5, that could be something interesting. And I'm going to go ahead and say build and run. And now this is going to ask me where I would like to put it. I want to put it into my interactive Unity demo folder in here. So I'm going to select this folder. I'm going to hit build and run. And it's going to take a few seconds to kind of go through. We don't really have a complex game. There's not really complex lighting here. But it's still going to kind of go through all the different objects and whatnot and go from there. So we'll run through this. And it's going to open our game for us. Check that out. I have a video game, y'all. A very boring one, but think of the possibilities. And again, I did not write one line of code. By the way, everyone always wonders what happens if you fall off the edge here. Let me show you. Let's see if I can back off the edge here. You will infinitely fall in space. So I'm going to hit escape here, and I have it in full screen, which is not my ideal situation. So let me hit Control-Alt-Delete real quick. Usually I don't load these in full screen here. And we will kind of shut down that game. There we go. Sorry about that. And let me show you where that game actually is. So if we go into our desktop, you'll find that we now have a playable Unity exe file. So if I go to the properties, this is an exe, just like any other program, at least on a Windows machine. If you're on a Mac, it's going to come up as an app, an app file, and this is playable on your Mac as well. And so all of these things, these three objects in particular, really need, in the data folder, need to come with your file. All right. So these are some other files I just randomly had in. But if I double click on this file, it's going to open it up. And if it keeps opening it up in full screen, let me show you just how to get rid of that. So let's go ahead and rebuild this real quick. Let's exit out of our game and let's do another build. Let's go back in, File, Build Settings, and then we can do player settings here. That's something you can kind of play around with. So we can look at audio, we can go through and look at like how it's outputting your file, physics, player settings here. Go through all of them. Here's the quality. Right now it's set to ultra. So again, we didn't have much going on. And then our player, we could add an icon for our game. Right now it's just the default icon. So if I went and added my own picture, I could definitely do that. Resolution and presentation, I want to take it off of full screen mode. So I want to say windowed for the time being, just because it's kind of annoying. And I'm going to hit close. So if we do a build and run, this is going to ask us, we're going to actually put this in a new folder. And we're going to call this our game. If I could spell. There we go. Hit select folder. It's going to run the build and run for us. We'll give it a few seconds, and hopefully we won't have a giant full screen window. There it goes. Now you can always make this full screen, but this is a lot easier. If I hit escape now, I can just X out of it. If I hit escape, I can go into my game, play around. That is how you do interactivity in Unity, which I absolutely adore. It's very easy with plugins, much like the first person FP kind of standard asset here. We can do a lot of different things. You know, at this point, you could even start putting in your own objects. So you can really see now that we can kind of play with some of these objects and whatnot to kind of get them to have this cool effect. And so what's really great about this is there are some models included, like there's like a computer prop, an office room, just random props that you can actually drag onto your scene if you really wanted to. Now, these are going to be a little bigger, but I can actually take their scale down a little bit, so no worries there. And I'm going to take them and we're going to just put them on my ground plane here. So these came with the package, the asset package. I just wanted to show you how, you know, you can do some really, really nice effects. There we go. There's some trees in there, some office. Actually, it looks like little picnic stuff. That's kind of cool. All right. So once I get those into my scene to a point where I kind of line them up to the floor, you know, obviously I'd want to be a little more clear on this. There we go. I can kind of start playing with stuff. So the cool part about when you import your own assets into the scene, and let me just change the lighting there so you all can see, is each one of these assets obviously is, you can play with it. But what we can also do is when we have our game itself, so if I hit play again, when you start importing assets, you may find that some of them you go right through. All right, so that's a little like annoying. You know, you want to like bump into stuff, and you know, obviously these assets are really big at the moment. So let me unplay this. But what we want to do is actually make these colliding or collidable, and that's what, you know, in games when you run into things like walls and whatnot. So we're gonna start. Let's start with just like something super simple like this table. We'll double click on this table till we can highlight it. And we're going to move it over here just so we can play with it. All right, so right now you can walk right through this table. So let's go ahead and add a collision object. I'm going to do add component. I'm going to type the word collision, not even get through the word collision. And there's things like a box collider. You may have remembered this from like N64 games where you just like were kind of on the object. So if I hit a box collider, it's now going to interact with my camera. So if we hit play, drop it here. Let's go over to our table. There it is. I'm going to run right into it. See, I can't go through it anymore. I can actually back up a little bit. And I probably, if I time my jump right, can jump on top of that. It may be a little too high for my jump right now. My character is a little short. But I could actually stand on that now. So that's one way to do it. If we didn't do the box collider, another colliding option is also the mesh collider. So if you have something that you want more detailed, you can actually put in this mesh. So let's say I want to be able to sneak underneath it, but run into the feet, but still be able to like sneak through this bottom part. That's where a mesh collider would come in. So colliders are a really great way to kind of start building walls and doors and things that you can't penetrate and run through with the camera, and start giving your game a little more life. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson. And right now it's just your chance to explore the controller that we got. So go ahead and download the FP All-in-One. It's free. Your account on Unity is free. It takes seconds to kind of drag and drop it into the game, and then start breaking things. Start exploring, how this, you can create your own interactive scene. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you guys next time.